The steel hull of the USS Blackfin groaned under the weight of 500 meters of seawater. It was a low, rhythmic sound, the structural protest of a 60-unit machine pushed to its absolute limit. Inside the attack submarine, the air was a thick, recirculated soup of ozone, burnt hydraulic fluid, and the faint, metallic temps of human sweat. Commander Marcus Vane sat in the darkened control room. The only light came from the dull, blood-red glow of the battle lanterns, casting long, dancing shadows against the bulkheads. They were deep, far deeper than the official Navy chart said the seafloor existed in this sector. Their mission was a black op. They were here to tap into a deep-sea communication cable nestled in a jagged trench that the enemy considered their own private sanctuary. Sonar. "Give me a sweep," Vane whispered. In a submarine, a whisper wasn't a choice. It was a survival instinct. When you are 500 meters down, sound is the only thing that's real. Sound is life. Silence is the only shield you have left. "Passive only, Captain," Petty Officer Miller replied. His headset was pressed so tight against his ears it left deep imprints in his skin. "The water is unnervingly quiet. Thermal layers are shifting above us, creating a ceiling of distortion. No mechanical signatures. No screws, no pumps, no active pings. As far as the world knows, we're the only soul in the abyss." Vane nodded, but his grip on the armrest of his command chair didn't loosen. They had been running on battery power for 6 hours, drifting like a massive, steel ghost through the silt. The Blackfin was a billion-dollar apex predator, designed to be the quietest thing in the ocean. But in the deep, quiet didn't always mean you were alone. It just meant the other guy was better at hiding. Captain Miller's voice suddenly tightened. It wasn't an alarm, but it carried a sharp, jagged edge of confusion. "I've got something. Bearing 095. Vane leaned over the sonar console. The waterfall display, usually a steady flow of blue and green data, showed a sudden, jagged line of interference. It wasn't the rhythmic thrum-thrum of a multi-blade propeller. It wasn't the high-pitched whine of a nuclear cooling pump. It was a low-frequency hum so deep, it was felt in the marrow of the crew's bones, rather than heard by their ears. "Is it a sub? A coup? Maybe one of those new Boreas?" Vane asked. Miller shook his head, his brow furrowing into a mask of concentration. "Negative, sir. No blade count. No cavitation bubbles. It's moving, but it's not pushing water like a displaced hull. It's just there. And Captain, it's massive." Vane looked at the digital depth gauge. They were sitting on the precipice of a suboceanic canyon that dropped another 3,000 meters into the Earth's crust. "Rig 4 ultra quiet," Vane commanded. "All non-essential systems off. I want this boat dead in the water. I want us to be a rock." The command rippled through the sub without a single word being spoken. Sailors moved in their socks, avoiding any metal-on-metal contact. The galley shut down, the ovens cooling into silence. The air conditioning died, and within minutes, the temperature inside the hull began to climb. The humidity rose until the walls began to sweat, droplets of condensation trickling down the electronics. This was the silent watch. Every man on board knew the drill. You don't speak. You don't drop a wrench. You don't even shift in your bunk. You become a part of the steel. You wait. For the next 4 hours, the Blackfin was a tomb. The only sound was the faint, rhythmic drip-drip of water falling from the overhead pipes onto the deck plates. Vane watched the sonar screen. The Phantom wasn't leaving. It was circling them. It moved with an impossible fluidity, gliding through the high-pressure trenches at speeds that should have ripped a man-made hull into scrap metal. "It's closing," Miller whispered, his face ghostly pale in the red light. "Range, 500 yards. 400. Captain, it's directly above us." Suddenly, a massive, dull thud vibrated through the entire submarine. It wasn't an explosion. There was no flash, no heat. It was a physical impact. Something immense had brushed against the Blackfin. The 70-ton ship tilted 5 degrees to port, the internal supports screaming and popping as they were compressed by an external force. "Reports," Vane hissed. "External sensors are failing," the XO whispered, clinging to a grab bar. "Whatever that is, it's bigger than the boat. It's investigating us." Vane felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple and sting his eye. They were trapped in a pressurized metal tube 500 meters down, being toyed with by something that didn't appear on any Navy manual. The air was getting thin. Oxygen levels were dropping into the danger zone because Vane refused to turn the scrubbers back on. To turn on the oxygen scrubbers was to make noise. To make noise was to die. Hallucinations start at 18% oxygen. The ship's medic warned in a low, raspy breath. "We've been sitting at 19% for 2 hours. The men are starting to see things, Captain." The crew was starting to drift. Men stared at the bulkheads, watching the shadows move in the corners of their vision. The Phantom continued its slow, deliberate circle. Every few minutes, a low, melodic moan would vibrate through the hull, a sound so lonely, so ancient, and so powerful that it made the veteran sailors weep without knowing why. "It's not a sub," Miller gasped, pulling his headset off and staring at the hull. "Captain, I can hear it without the gear. It's singing." Vane put his ear to the cold, sweating steel of the command console. He heard it too. A complex, haunting series of clicks, whistles, and deep, resonant groans layered over that bone-shaking hum. It wasn't mechanical. It was biological. But no whale lived at this depth. No known creature grew to this size. "It thinks we're one of them," Vane realized. The Blackfin's whole shape, the way we're drifting in the current. It doesn't see a machine. It sees a rival or a mate. The impact came again, harder this time. A localized alarm blared on the engineering console. A hairline fracture had formed in a secondary ballast tank. Water was beginning to spray in a fine, high-pressure mist in the aft compartment. "We have to blow ballast and surface, Captain. We're going to implode if it hits us again," the XO urged, his voice cracking with the onset of hypoxia. "No," Vane said, his voice as cold as the water outside. "If we blow ballast, we create a massive acoustic signature. If that thing is a predator, it'll tear us open before we hit the thermal layer. We stay quiet. We stay dead." Hour 12. The air was foul, smelling of CO2 and fear. The crew was panting, their lungs struggling to find a single molecule of fresh oxygen in the stagnant heat. Miller was slumped over his console, staring at the green screen with glazed, unblinking eyes. The Phantom had stopped circling. It was now hovering directly above them, its massive shadow blocking the faint bioluminescence of the trench. It was waiting. Suddenly, the sonar erupted. Not with the song of the creature, but with a sharp, aggressive sound. Ping, ping, ping. Active sonar. Miller shouted, snapping back to alertness. High frequency. It's an enemy destroyer on the surface. They're dropping depth charges. They must have picked up the Phantom's mass on their long-range arrays. Boom. The first charge was distant, but in the water, sound travels with terrifying efficiency. The Blackfin rocked. The Phantom reacted instantly. The low hum turned into a deafening roar of displaced water. The creature lashed out, its massive bulk slamming into the sea floor with the force of an earthquake, sending a cloud of silt upward that blinded the sub's external cameras. The destroyer is targeting the creature, Vane realized. They think the Phantom is us. Another depth charge detonated, much closer this time. The lights in the Blackfin flickered, buzzed, and died. Total darkness. The only sound was the frantic, ragged breathing of 70 men and the screeching of the creature outside. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. "Captain, the Phantom is rising," Miller yelled. "It's heading straight for the surface. It's going after the ship." Vane seized the moment. "Driver, dead slow ahead. Level plane. Use the silt cloud as cover. We're slipping out the back door while they're busy with each other." As the Blackfin crept away, the sensors picked up the chaotic sounds of a literal clash of titans on the surface. Explosions, the frantic churning of destroyer engines, the rattling of deck guns, and then a sound like a mountain collapsing into the sea. A massive, terminal screech, followed by the sound of 20,000 tons of steel being twisted like a soda can. And then, a silence so deep it felt like the end of the world. The Blackfin traveled for 6 more hours in the dark, before Vane allowed them to rise to snorkel depth. When the valves finally opened and fresh, salty sea air pumped into the boat, the men didn't cheer. They collapsed. They wept. They had been in the dark for 18 hours. They had shared the water with a god, and they had watched it go to war. Vane stood on the bridge as the sun began to rise over the horizon. The surface was calm, but a few miles back, a massive slick of oil and unidentifiable debris floated on the waves. There was no sign of the destroyer, and no sign of the Phantom. He went back below and looked at the sonar logs. Miller was still sitting there, staring at the final recording of the creature's song. "You're not going to report the creature, are you, sir?" Miller asked quietly. Vane looked at the data, the impossible speeds, the sheer mass, the song that sounded like a prayer. "The Navy wants to hear about enemy subs and cable taps, Miller. They don't want to hear that the ocean belongs to something else. They'd just send more ships, more depth charges, more death." Vane reached out and hit the delete key on the acoustic file. "Log it as a tectonic shift," Vane said. "We were never there, and neither was it." The Blackfin dived again, returning to the shadows of the deep. But every man on that boat knew the truth. They had gone into the trench, thinking they were the apex predators of the world. They came back knowing they were just guests in a house that didn't belong to them. Sometimes, the greatest act of war isn't the shot you fire. It's the silence you keep when you realize you're not the biggest thing in the water.